In this video, I'll show you how to install a lightweight underdrive pulley kit on your Mazda Rx8 so that it goes from looking like this to looking like this. First off, if you're new here and like to watch Rx8 videos, then consider subscribing. Today I'll be installing the SX Rotary underdrive pulley kit that also comes with two new belts, as the OEM ones will no longer fit. An underdrive pulley kit reduces the potential for water pump cavitation and overworking the alternator at higher RPM ranges. The kit comes in 3 different colors, and to treat you guys, there will be a special discount code in the description. First off, you need to remove your airbox. SX Rotary made a great tutorial on how to do it. The link to the video will be in the description. But if you have an intake like me, you can leave it in. Next, disconnect your battery and take it out. Move your battery connectors away to free up some working space. Now push the bottom part of the battery case and pull the upper part to get it loose. Do this all around. When done, take it out. Next up, we have to remove the 3 bolts holding down the bottom piece. Loosen the central bolt with a 10mm socket and extension on your ratchet. When done, take it out. Remove the 2 remaining bolts with a 10mm wrench. When done, take out the bracket. To give you guys a better perspective, I'll remove my strut bar, but you don't have to do it. Next up, we have to release this bolt that holds the alternator in place. So release the bolt with a 14mm socket, but don't remove it. Next, release the bolt on the side of the alternator's upper bracket, but don't remove it. Now release the top bolt so that the alternator starts dropping and reducing tension on the upper belt. Once the side bolt is at the bottom of the bracket, the belt should be loose and you can take it off the pulleys. Next up, we have to repeat the same process to detension the lower belt. So release the side bolt with a 17mm socket, but do not take it out unless you're also replacing that pulley. Next, release the upper bolt with a 10mm socket and extension, but be careful not to remove the bolt completely, just enough for the belt to be loose. When the belt is nice and loose, remove it from the pulleys and take it out. Now take out the remaining belt. And there we go! If you just need to replace your belts, this is as far as you need to go. But to replace the pulleys, there is a little bit more work to do. We can see that my belt has seen better days, so it's a good thing that I'm replacing it. If you're wondering, the wider belt goes on top and the narrow one on the bottom. You can also count the number of grooves on the belt and compare it with the pulleys. Next up, it's time to remove the alternator pulley. And the only way you're gonna do this is by using an impact gun with a 24mm impact socket. Do not use normal ratchet sockets, as they are not made to be used with an impact gun. The impact gun is the key to removing the nuts on the pulley. You can either borrow it from a friend or mechanic, or buy an electric one for around $50, or invest some money and buy a proper quality battery powered impact gun that you can also take on the track. Next, spray some WD-40 on the nut to make the removal process easier. Next up, put on a grippy glove, and for extra safety you can wrap a piece of cloth around the pulley. Now hold the pulley so that it doesn't move and release the nut with your impact gun. And there we go, simple and fast. Money well spent. Make sure to save the nut, as you're gonna need it to tighten the new pulley. Next, it's time to remove the water pump pulley. To do this, you're gonna need a screwdriver and a 10mm socket on your ratchet. Place the screwdriver like this to prevent the pulley from spinning. With your other hand, release the bolts. When all 3 bolts are loose, unscrew them with your hand and take them out. With that done, you can now take out the pulley. Next up, we have to remove the main crank pulley. Firstly, we have to remove the 4 bolts holding it in place. Put your car in gear, take your ratchet with 10mm socket and release all 4 bolts. When done, unscrew them with your hand and take them out. This pulley is a bit hard to get off, so to do it, firstly put the car in neutral with your handbrake on, obviously. Spray some WD-40 on the central part and then get a pry bar and a ratchet with a 19mm socket. Put the pry bar behind the metal plate of the pulley and gently pry it against this bolt here. Be careful not to damage the plate as you're doing so. So pry the pulley a bit, rotate it, pry it again, and do so all around the pulley to get it nice and loose. As you're doing so, it will slowly come apart. In my case, the front part of the pulley came off first, and after a while, also the rest of it. Now take out the pulley and the positioning plate. You want to check the plate and make sure it wasn't damaged or badly bent, but if you did it carefully, you shouldn't have any issues at all. Next, you need to clean off all the rust on the hub so that future pulley removals won't be as hard as this one. Take a piece of sanding paper and sand the rust away. You can rotate the hub like before so you can sand it all around. And there we go. Now you want to pay attention to these two metal pins sticking out. These are alignment pins, which means that the pulley can only be installed in one specific way. So position your plate so that the two metal pins fit inside the two holes on the plate. Next, pay attention on how the bolt holes are aligned. If they are not aligned properly, like in this case, you have to take off the plate, turn it 180 degrees so that the upper pinhole becomes the lower pinhole, and position the plate back on. Now we can see that the bolt holes are perfectly aligned with the positioning plate and everything sits flush. This is very important, as otherwise you won't be able to insert the bolts or pulley. Next up, take your crank pulley and take a look at where the two pinholes are located. Position it on the plate so that the two metal pins go inside the two holes of the pulley. Next, check that the bolt holes are perfectly clear and aligned. If not, turn the pulley by 180 degrees. Now open the pack of bolts. You should have 4 bolts and washers for the crank pulley and 3 bolts and washers for the water pump pulley. You'll notice that these bolts have an internal hex head. Now put your washers on the 4 bolts and screw them in the pulley by hand, just like that. You have various options when it comes to tightening them, but bear in mind that you can't super tighten them like some of the bolts on the car. You can either use a 5mm Allen key, a screwdriver with a 5mm hex head. The best and recommended way to do it would be with a torque wrench and a special 5mm head adapter socket. The manual's recommended torque spec for the pulley bolts is between 14.2 Nm and 17.9 Nm. So pick your method and tighten the 4 bolts so that they are nice and snug, but don't go all John Cena on them. When done, take the water pump pulley and position it on the hub. Make sure that the holes are perfectly aligned with the ones on the pulley. After that, screw in the 3 bolts with washers with your hand. When done, put on a grippy glove and hold the pulley while you're tightening the bolts with the method you have chosen. I've switched to the screwdriver for demonstrational purposes. Or you can use the screwdriver method to hold the pulley, but that can scratch the paint. And finally, it's time to install the alternator pulley. So position it in place. Take the nut you've removed at the beginning and screw it on with your hand. Use your impact gun to tighten it. And there we go, all of our pulleys are now perfectly installed. Now it's time to install the 2 belts that came with the kit, the upper belt and the lower belt. So let's take out the upper wide one, stretch it and install it on the 3 pulleys. Next, we can take out the lower narrow one, stretch it and position it on the other 3 pulleys. You need to make sure that the belts sit flush on the pulley and that there is no part sticking out or out of place. So check with your hand all around the pulleys to make sure that the belt is perfectly in place. With that done, tighten the upper bolt of the lower belt with your ratchet and 10mm socket. You will notice that the belt will start getting tighter. When done, tighten the side bolt with your 17mm socket. Next, you want to turn the crank pulley and double check that everything is in place. Next up, you have to tighten the upper bolt so that the side nut reaches its former position that you can see on the black bracket. When done, you should be able to twist your belts by 90 degrees. That's how you'll know they have the correct tension. Next, tighten the side nut on the bracket. Lastly, tighten the bolt that holds the alternator in place with a 14mm socket. And there we go! The pulley kit is now fully installed and it looks spectacular. Now let's put back the battery and move on to the next step. Turn your key so that the lights illuminate and pump the brakes hard and fast 20 to 25 times so that the oil pressure gauge bounces. The gauge won't bounce in all Rx8 models, so if it doesn't, don't worry. Now that we've reset the PCM, we can turn on the car. Everything is working fine, no strange sounds or wobbling, so I can say that the pulley kit was successfully installed and I'm super happy with it. And with that said, I think I can conclude the video. As always, all the items and tools that I've used will be linked in the description. If you found this video useful, give it a big thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. Also, feel free to check out more RX8 videos on my channel.